All right guys, so over here on the workbench we have the cylinder head. We're gonna go ahead and start the disassembly while we get everything ready to get prepped to go into the parts washer. So first thing I'm gonna do is we're gonna take these spark plugs out because we are gonna be replacing them. All right, so now that we got the spark plugs out, we can go ahead and start with the disassembly. We're gonna wanna remove the valve springs by removing the retainers so that we can remove the valves. And the way we're gonna do that is instead of using a C-clamp like this, which we will use this for the reinstallation, just to get these out quicker, we're gonna go ahead and use this tool that I got from Lyle, which we're gonna use to remove the valve springs, and I'll show you how we do that. All right, so what you're gonna need in order to do this is you're gonna need a rag or some type of towel that you can put underneath the cylinder, whichever one you're working on. So right now we're gonna start with these two, which we've already removed one, but we're gonna show you the second one here. So we put the rag underneath the two valves for this cylinder. We're gonna use a tool and we're gonna use a hammer to pound the retainers out. Now the tool has a magnet inside, and what it does is it captures the retainers inside of the tool, which makes it really easy for removal and for quick disassembly. Now we can flip the head over. So we'll go ahead and start pulling the valves out. And this is an opportune time also to check for valve guide wear, which you can simply do by just kind of taking the valve and try to move it side to side. If you feel excessive play in the valve, then you'll know that you have excessive wear in the valve guide, which this one I really can't move it at all side to side, so it feels pretty good and it moves in and out really smoothly. So that's a good indication that the valve and the valve guide are in good condition. We'll go ahead and remove the other one too. That's the exhaust valve. Again, we'll move it up and down, in and out. Check for excessive play. If that valve guide feels good, we should be good to go. We'll set these aside and we'll move on to the next cylinder. So again, we're gonna put the towel down. All right, so now we can go ahead and remove the valve stem seals. Just using a pair of pliers, we can pop them off. All right guys, so now that we have all the valves removed, we can go ahead and inspect the valve seats. We're looking for any rust or pitting or any scratches or deep gouges. And these valve seats actually look pretty good. All right guys, so just a quick mention, if you're working on this type of engine, these do have a high tendency to have cracks on the deck surface of the cylinder head. So that's one of the things you're gonna wanna inspect. Just kind of look in between here, between the cylinders, and check all of the deck surface. Make sure that there aren't any cracks, which these heads look pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead and get them in the washer, clean them up. All right guys, so we moved the cylinder head to the parts washer. We're gonna go ahead and give it a good scrubbing. We're using the Safety Clean solvent. You're gonna wanna wear gloves when you use this parts washer, and also the fumes are pretty strong, so make sure that you're in a well ventilated area when you're using this. We're going to give the cylinder head a thorough bath. All right guys, so next up we're going to show you how we clean the valve guides. We're just going to use this nylon brush right here on the drill bit. This nylon brush will not damage the metal, but it's good for getting inside these valve guides so that we can clean any carbon buildup or any oil slud. All right guys, so we've completed the preliminary cleanup and bath of the cylinder head, but if you look inside the intake ports, you're going to see that there's still a lot of this soot carbon caked up on the walls of the intake ports. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to take this over to the power washer, and we're going to use a degreaser to go ahead and power wash this out. All right guys, so after the power washing, we'll go ahead and finish cleaning up and we'll start the reassembly of the head. Clean versus dirty. Clean, dirty. Clean, dirty. All right guys, so starting the reassembly of the cylinder heads, we're gonna start by lapping the valves. What we're gonna be using is a valve lapping compound like this. You can see there's the part number right down there, 80037 Permatex valve grinding compound. So we're gonna open this up. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take some of this lapping compound, just a little bit. We're gonna put it on the valve seat here. And then we're gonna go ahead and insert the valve. We're gonna take a lapping tool like this, stick it on there, and we're going to spin it around, spread that compound across the valve seat. Then make sure that we have the compound all the way around the valve seat. And now we can start lapping the valve. And periodically you want to go ahead and lift up on the valve, and you want to inspect the valve and the valve seat. Make sure that we're getting an even pattern. And now that we're done with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next valve. All right, so now that we've got all the valves lapped, we can go ahead and start pulling them out, cleaning up all the lapping compound. And these valves, now that they've been lapped, we're gonna need to set them aside and make sure that they stay in order to where we lapped them. All right guys, so next up, we're gonna go ahead and install the valve stem seals. And we're gonna start with the intake valve stem seals. Let's put a little bit of oil, squirt it on there. Make sure we lube it up. Then we're gonna use a special installation tool, a 21mm socket. We're just gonna tap it into place. Now we'll do the exhaust valve stem seals. And we're all set. All right, so now we can go ahead and reinstall the valves. I'm gonna put a little bit of oil in there. All right, so now that we've set the valve spring on there with the retainer, we're gonna go ahead and use this C-clamp, and we're gonna press down on that valve spring so that we can install the security retainer. All right, just a quick description of how we're gonna do this. We've already stuck the valve in there after we cleaned it. Now we're gonna go ahead and set the valve spring on, the valve spring retainer, and then we'll use a clamp and now we'll compress the spring, and then we'll go ahead and put the retainers on. All right, so as you can see, we now have all our valves and valve springs installed. We'll go ahead and clean it up one more time and set it aside for reinstallation. Guess what, we just got back from the machine shop. All right guys, so as you can see, we just got the block back from the machine shop. We went ahead and had them clean and inspect the block. They double checked our measurements as far as the cylinder bores go, and everything checked out good. So we just went ahead and had them holding the cylinder walls. You can see, nice, clean. We also had them install the cam bearings. So if you look, you'll see we have all new cam bearings all the way through. So we're pretty much good to go. Let's start the reassembly. All right guys, so we're getting ready for the reassembly of the short block. Over here we have our block. Over on the table we have all our parts fresh out of the parts washer. We've already cleaned and inspected all the parts. We have the cylinder heads over there already pre-assembled. So let's move over to the engine block and let me show you what we're gonna do first. So now that we got the engine block, before we install the main bearings, what we're gonna wanna do is take a blowgun like this that has a rubber tip on the end of it. And what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna go to each of these oiling holes. You're gonna wanna make sure you blow through it. So we're gonna put the tip there, blow some compressed air through there. We'll go to here, blow the compressed air. Next hole, next hole, next hole. We also have a couple of oiling holes on the front, and that's just going to make sure that our oiling ports are nice and clean. What you also want to do is make sure that you blow out these holes right here for the main cap, so that We don't have any fluid or any oil or liquid inside of these. You can see there's dirt in there. You just want to make sure you get any debris out that's going to affect our torquing whenever we go down to torque the main caps. So let's go ahead and install the main bearings. All right, so over here we have the main bearings. The center one are going to use these thrust washer main bearings, so we can go ahead and install those. We'll start with this one here in the center. Make sure it's nice and even on the edges. Move on to the next one. And you'll see there's a little tab and a notch in the block where that tab is going to go. So we'll just slide it into place. All right, so we got some engine assembly lube here. We're going to go ahead and lube this thing up. All right, guys, so over here we have the main caps. We have them in order from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go ahead and install the bearings. Again, we're going to line up the tab with the notch. All right, so now that we have all our bearings set, we're going to go ahead and lube these up as well. Then we'll go ahead and install them. Install number 1. And number 5. All right, so just to line these up, I'm going to go ahead and slide the studs in. Then we're just going to use a rubber mallet to tap these down. Now we can go ahead and install the rest of the bolts. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and start the torquing procedure. What we're going to do is we're going to torque these center bolts to 15 foot-pound torque. As you can see, we have the torque sequence. We're going to start in the center. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, those are going to be the center bolts. We're going to start there. We're going to torque them to 15 foot-pound torque. That's going to be the first pass. So I've got the digital torque wrench set up to 15 foot-pound torque. Let's go ahead and get started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we're going to go ahead and torque angle them to 80 degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and do the outer studs, 15 foot-pound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we'll go ahead and do the torque angle, 51 degrees. 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. All right, so now we can go ahead and torque these side cap bolts to 18 foot-pound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are now done with the installation of the crankshaft, the main caps, and the main bolts. All right, guys, so now that we have the crankshaft bolted down, we should be able to effortlessly spin the crank. So if you can see with one hand, I can easily and smoothly spin the crankshaft over. But there is one check we need to do, is we need to check for a crankshaft end play. That's going to determine whether or not we have any play in the crankshaft going back and forth. So let me go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. All right, guys, so in order to check for crankshaft end play, we're going to be using this dial gauge. We already have it set up and zeroed out. Let me show you what we're going to do. I got a screwdriver in my hand, and what we're going to be doing is using the screwdriver to push the crankshaft forward and backward. And we're going to want to see how much play we have, how much movement we have forward and backward. So So if we concentrate on the dial gauge here, you see it's at 0. I'm going to push it all the way forward. You see that is 0. Now I'm going to push the crankshaft back using the screwdriver. I'm going to push it forward again. I'm going to push it back. Push it forward. I'm going to push it back. Now the specification is they want no more than 12 thousandths of an inch of play. We look really good. So now we can go ahead and continue. Alright guys, so now that we have the engine turned upside, the next check we need to do is we need to check for piston ring end gap. I have the top piston ring right here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put it into the cylinder bore. Like that. We're going to use one of the pistons to push the ring about ½ an inch down into the bore, like so. Now we're going to take a feeler gauge and we're going to check the gap right here. All right, now the specification for this is somewhere between 9 thousandths and 17 thousandths. If you have less than 9 thousandths of a gap, then the piston ring gap is too tight. If you have more than 17 thousandths, then the gap is too wide. So we need to be somewhere in the middle. So because our spec is 9 thousandths, I'm going to go ahead and start with the 10 thousandths. And that slides right through there. Let's move up. I'm going to jump up to a 12 thousandths. And that's exactly what we want to feel. When I put the 12 thousandths in here, we have just the slightest amount of drag on the feeler gauge. So this is indicating that our gap is at 12 thousandths. So we are good to go as far as this piston ring goes. We're going to need to check the second piston ring and then the oiling rings. All right, we have the second compression ring. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. We'll put it in by hand. I'm going to use the piston to push it about an inch down the bore. Now the specification for this is between 17 thousandths and 27 thousandths. So we want to be somewhere in between there. 18. 19 feels a little tight. Let's move down to 18. And let's move down to 17. All right, so 17 fits perfectly in there. I feel the slightest amount of drag. That's what you want to feel. So we are right at 17 thousandths on that gap. So we're good to go. All right, guys, so we're over here at the table, pre-assembling the piston rings on the pistons. We've already measured everything out. So this part right here is just a little time consuming. Tedious. It's very tedious. And we're gonna put these piston rings, we're gonna need to put them in order. All right, so this is the second compression ring. I've already got the oiling rings installed. I don't want to bore you with that, but we'll go ahead and set this ring like that. And remember, we're going to want to put them 180 degrees off from each other. So we'll flip this around and we'll take the top compression ring. We'll do the same thing. Alright, so as you can see, we have a top ring gap on this side and the bottom ring gap on this side. So we'll go ahead and do the rest of the pistons. Alright guys, so now that we have pre-installed all the piston rings on the pistons, we're going to go ahead and put the rod bearings on. And we'll do the same for the cap, just like that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and lubricate cylinder walls down with a clean rag. Just want to make sure you get a nice even coating. As you can see, we've already pre-lubricated the crankshaft journal. Now we're gonna go ahead and install the pistons. All right guys, so looking at the face of the piston, you'll see that we have a dot. That dot is gonna be pointed toward the front of the engine, which is on this side. We went ahead and rotated it. All right guys, so we set the piston inside the cylinder. We've got the compression tool already installed. I'm gonna go ahead and just tap around the compression tool to set it in place. And then we'll start tapping on the piston. Get it to set. Once it's set, we'll go ahead and check to make sure the connecting rod is lining up with the crankshaft. Okay, so I got it here. I'm gonna go ahead and start pushing the piston through. And I'm just gonna guide it into place. And now we're set. We can go ahead and put the cap on. Let's go ahead and install the cap. And we'll move on to the next one. All right guys, so next up we're gonna go ahead and torque down the connecting rod cap bolts. The torque spec for this is 15 foot-pound torque is gonna be the first pass. And then after that, we're gonna do 75 degrees. So I got the torque wrench set to 15 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and start with the front ones here. Now we'll set the torque angle to 75 degrees. All right, now we'll spin the crankshaft over, put these up at the top, and we'll move on to the next ones. All right guys, so we now have our short block assembled. So you can see we have all the pistons inside of the cylinder bores. We've already went ahead and torqued down the connecting rod bolts. Next up, we can go ahead and move on to installing the camshaft. All right guys, now it's time to install the camshaft. We're gonna add a little bit of oil to the journals. All right, so now we have the camshaft installed. All right guys, so we have our new camshaft thrust plate installed. We're gonna go ahead and torque it. All right guys, so now it's time to time the engine. If you look at the crank gear, you'll see that there's a dot right here at the top. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna line the cam gear with this dot to dot. We spin the cam over so we can line that dot to dot. We're gonna go ahead and put the timing chain on, make sure these dots are lined up, and then bolt everything down. All right guys, so it's time to install the lifters. We've already pre-soaked these lifters in oil. Got the lifter trays here. They're just gonna help us keep the lifter straight. We got them in like that. All right guys, so the last place we left off, we were installing the cylinder head, but it turns out the parts place actually sent us the wrong head bolts. So that was Saturday evening. We were planning on getting the motor back together Saturday evening, but it was too late in the evening. We couldn't get the right bolts. So that pushed us over to Monday, which kind of pushed us behind schedule. But we got the correct bolts now. Let's go ahead and get this thing back together. All right, guys, so we have our new head gasket. If you look right up here, you'll see it's labeled front. That's going to be toward the front of the vehicle, front of the engine. Let's go ahead and lay the gasket down. Make sure you set it on the dowels. Now let's go ahead and install the cylinder head. All right, guys, so over here I have one of the new head bolts. Let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to pre-oil these before we install them. And the way I'm going to do that is simply, I have a little bucket of clean motor oil, and I'm just going to quickly dip it, just the tip where the threads are, in the motor oil. And what you're going to want to do is just shake this off to try to get any excess motor oil off of this, because what you don't want is for this oil to pull inside of the hole that's in the block, because if that happens, that can throw off our torque whenever we go to torque these bolts down. So like I said, just lightly oil it. As you can see, it's just wet from the oil. Now I'm going to go ahead and drop the head bolt in, and then we'll do that for the rest of them. All right, guys, just to quickly address this, because I know people are going to be asking about it or telling me that I'm doing something wrong, but yes, I did use my small electric impact to just run the bolts down until they were flush. Yes, I have this thing on the lowest setting, and yes, I stop before this thing actually starts to forcefully turn that bolt. All right, guys, just to show you the torque spec and the torque sequence, I've got it printed up right here. Hopefully you can see it. The sequence we're going to be going in, if you look right here, is going to be center out. We're going to start in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. These at the top are going to be the smaller bolts. Now if we look at the torque spec, up at the top we are dealing with the first design, and the difference between the first design and the second design is that these two bolts, number 9 and number 10, which is this one right here at the front and this one right here at the back, those two bolts are actually shorter than the rest of the bolts. So if we pay attention here, the first round in the sequence, we're going to do 22 foot-pound torque. We're basically going to torque them all. This is only dealing with the M11 bolts, so this is going to be 1 through 10 is where we're going to start. So first they want us to torque it to 22 foot-pounds, and then they want us to do a pass at 90 degrees. So first we do 22 foot-pounds in sequence here, and then we'll do a 90-degree pass on all these. And then the third pass, which is the final pass, if you look, they're telling us excluding the medium length bolts at the front and the rear of the cylinder head. So those are the two bolts, number 9 and number 10, that we were talking about. We're going to do another 90-degree pass on all of them except number 9 and number 10. On those, we're going to do 50 degrees. So let's go ahead and set up our torque wrench. All right, guys, as you can see, I got my torque wrench over here, and we have it set to 22 foot-pounds. You look right here, 22 foot-pounds. Hopefully you guys can see that without the glare. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these in sequence. We're going to start up here. Number 1. That's 22 foot-pound on number 1. We'll move down to number 2. We'll go ahead and jump over to number 3, which is this one over here. Now we'll jump over to number 4. It's going to be this one down here. That's number 4. We'll jump up to number 5. That's number 5. We'll move over to number 6. That's number 6. We'll move to number 7, which is right next to it. That's number 7. We'll move over to number 8, which is this one down here. That's number 8. Move up to number 9. It's number 9. And finally number 10. All right, guys, so I set my torque wrench to 90 degrees. We're going to go ahead and do all 10 of these bolts to 90 degrees. We'll start with number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 5. Number 10. All right, guys, so final pass is gonna be another 90 degrees, but we're gonna be excluding number 9 and number 10. I'm just gonna go ahead and mark these so that I don't forget. And for 9 and 10, we're gonna go ahead and switch this over to 50 degrees. Right there. All right, that concludes the torque for all of the long bolts. Now we're gonna do the small bolts at the top. The 5 smaller bolts at the top are simply gonna be torqued to 22 foot-pound. Again, I got my torque wrench set to 22 foot-pound. We're gonna do that in order from center out. So starting at the center, this is number 11. All right, so that's all 15 head bolts torqued and ready to go. Now let's go ahead and flip this around and do the other side. All right, guys, so real quick, we're gonna go ahead and install the oil pump. This is our brand new unit that we have for milling. This is the high volume version. It's supposed to flow like 20% more oil. I've already pre-lubricated this thing. Let's go ahead and install it. All right, now we'll go ahead and torque these to 18 foot-pound. We're all set. All right, guys, so now we'll install this windage tray. All right, guys, it's time to install the oil pan. I've already got the gasket laid down, so let's go ahead and install the oil pan. Let's go ahead and put the bolts in, and we're going to torque these down to 106 inch-pounds. All right, guys, so we're gonna reinstall the timing cover. I've already got the new seal installed. We have the new gasket. We're ready to go on, but before we do that, we're gonna need to take some RTV. We're gonna wanna put a dab of it on each corner right here where the oil pan meets the timing cover. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we can go ahead and set the timing cover on. All right, guys, now here's a real important tip. Whenever you're bolting this timing cover on, all of these bolts, I've got them finger tight. They're not tightened down. I just ran the bolt flush, but it's not pressing up against the timing cover. The reason for this is because really you want to torque these 2 bottom bolts first, because these 2 bolts are for the oil pan, and what that's going to do is that's going to set or bring the timing cover down to mate up properly with the oil pan so the oil pan gasket does not leak. We want to make sure we tighten these 2 bolts, torque them down first, and then we can torque down the rest of them. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now that we have these bottom bolts torqued, we can go ahead and torque the rest of them. All right guys, next up we're gonna put the valley pan cover on. I've already got the gasket laid down and we've got the new grommets installed for the knock sensors. Let's go ahead and push down on it. That way we can get past those grommets. Now we can install the bolts and torque it down. All right guys, so moving back to the top of the engine, we're gonna go ahead and install these new push rods to go with those new hydraulic lifters that we installed and these new valve springs. So let's go ahead and drop these in. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and install these rails for the rocker arms. Kind of lay them there like that. Now we can go ahead and install the rocker arms. I've got these things soaking in the oil. We're gonna go ahead and start setting them down. Got the bolts right here. We're gonna go ahead and put them on there one at a time. Slide the bolt through there. This side is gonna go on the push rod. Make sure that push rod tip is seated on the rocker arm, and also try to do your best to make sure that that push rod is seated into the valve lifter. All right guys, so now it's time to torque down the rocker arms. The nice thing about this design is the lash is not adjustable, so all we have to do is torque them down, but there is a sequence for us to do it. I drew it down on a piece of paper here to make it easier for me. But if you look, I've already got cylinder number 1 on top dead center on the compression stroke. So what we're gonna need to do is torque down the rocker arms on the exhaust side for cylinders number 1, 2, 7, and 8. And at the same time, the intake rocker arms for cylinders 1, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to rotate the crank 360 degrees, and we're going to do the exhaust rocker arms 3, 4, 5, 6, and the intake rocker arms 2, 6, 7, and 8. This is the firing order. I kind of drew it up crudely, but this will give you an idea of what we're doing. The firing order on this engine is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to do this in order. Like I said, the torque spec is 22 foot-pound. Let's get started. All right, that's exhaust cylinder number 1. Now we need to do exhaust cylinder number 2. We're going to do this one. Now we're going to do exhaust cylinder number 7, which is going to be this one over here. Now exhaust cylinder number 8, which is going to be this one back here. Okay, now we can move on to the intake. Cylinder number 1, cylinder number 3, cylinder number 4, and finally cylinder number 5. All right, now we can go ahead and rotate the crankshaft 360 degrees. Right about there. Now we can continue exhaust cylinder number 3, which is going to be this one right here. No, this one right here. Now cylinder 4, which is right here. This. Now move this over. And now you can resist this one. Lock power. Thompson. Go up this way. And finally, 8, 20. All right, now just for good measure, I'm gonna spin the crank one more time, 360 degrees, and we're just gonna recheck that all these are at 22 foot-pound. We are all set. Now, as long as our engine timing and everything is correct, there should be no binding, anything like that on the engine. I'm gonna go ahead and spin it around. It should spin nice and smooth. Just watching the valve train, making sure everything's looking normal. And so far, everything looks good. Let's go ahead and get the valve covers on this thing. All right, guys, so we got the harmonic balancer on, the crank pulley. We did first have to seat the pulley with the old bolt and torquing it down to 240 foot-pound torque, and then removing the old bolt, putting in the new bolt, doing 37 foot-pound, and then an additional 140 degrees. So we really had to put some muscle into this, but we got it installed. Everything's ready to go. All right, guys, so that pretty much concludes our video. As far as the engine build goes, there's still a lot of little things that we need to do. We need to move over the sensors, crank sensor, cam sensor, knock sensor. We also need to move over the intake manifold, the exhaust manifolds, the water pump, but we really can't do any of that until we remove the old motor out of the truck. Once we get the motor out of the truck, then we can start swapping things over. There is also one more thing that I need to do before we can put this motor into the truck, is install the rear main seal along with the plate for the rear main seal. But I really can't do that until we get this engine off of the engine stand. And I'm not really gonna do that until we have the motor out of the truck and it's time for this one to go in. So running really good. We're gonna go ahead and bleed the cooling system. We got to recharge the Freon. A lot of little things we got to do, but there you have it. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you found it useful. Hopefully you found it informational. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed the channel, please subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, you can always comment down below, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks.